T-Rex protects human researcher. What happens next is beyond imagination. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Dr. Evelyn Carter never imagined her career as a paleontologist would lead her here. Standing in the heart of a prehistoric jungle, face to face with a living, breathing Tyrannosaurus Rex, the creature's massive head loomed over her. Its golden eyes locked onto hers with an unsettling intelligence. Its nostrils flared, inhaling her scent as if committing her presence to memory. Evelyn remained still, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had spent years preparing for this moment, theorizing about the behavior of these apex predators. But nothing could have prepared her for the sheer presence of a T-Rex in the flesh. It had all begun with a discovery so incredible it defied scientific explanation. A hidden valley, untouched by time, where dinosaurs still roamed freely. A team of researchers had been sent to study the phenomenon, but Evelyn had been the first to establish direct contact with the creatures. She had spent weeks observing from a distance, learning their habits, their movements, until today when one had finally noticed her. The T-Rex let out a low growl, the vibrations traveling through Evelyn's bones. She resisted the urge to run. Any sudden movement could trigger its predatory instincts. Instead, she slowly raised a hand, palm facing outward, a universal gesture of peace. For a long, tense moment, the dinosaur did nothing. Then, to her utter disbelief, it responded. The massive beast lowered its head slightly, its breath washing over her like a warm gust of wind. It did not attack. It did not roar. Simply observed. Evelyn swallowed hard, keeping her breathing steady. Was it curious? Was it considering her as prey? Or was there something else? Some deeper, unexpected understanding? Her radio crackled in her earpiece. "Dr. Carter, do you copy?" It was Dr. Malcolm Rhodes, the lead scientist of the expedition. Evelyn barely dared to move as she whispered, "I copy. What's your status?" "We lost visual on your tracker." Evelyn hesitated before answering. "I'm standing in front of a T-Rex. Looking at me." A moment of silence followed. Then, Malcolm's voice came back, laced with concern. "Evelyn, back away." Slowly, "I don't think it wants to hurt me," she whispered. "That's not a chance you want to take," Malcolm urged. "We need you to." A sudden rustling in the trees silenced both Evelyn and the voice in her ear. The T-Rex's head snapped toward the sound, its body tensing. Evelyn instinctively followed its gaze, scanning the dense foliage for signs of movement. Then, she heard it. An unfamiliar shriek, high-pitched and unnatural. The T-Rex let out a guttural snarl, stepping protectively in front of Evelyn. Her breath hitched. Was it shielding her? The predator's tail whipped across the ground, kicking up dirt as it issued a warning growl. Something was out there, something that even the mighty T-Rex considered a threat. Evelyn barely had time to process what was happening before the trees exploded outward. A creature lunged from the shadows, its elongated jaws snapping shut just inches from where she stood. It was unlike anything she had seen before, a hybrid of sorts, sleek and fast, with claws as long as daggers. Its eyes were filled with nothing but hunger. Before it could strike again, the T-Rex roared, a deafening, earth-shaking bellow that sent birds fleeing from the canopy. The hybrid beast hesitated for just a second, but that was all the T-Rex needed. With terrifying speed for a creature of its size, the T-Rex lunged forward, its massive jaws clamping down on the attacker's body. Bones cracked under the pressure as the hybrid let out a strangled cry. The struggle was brief but brutal. With a final shake of its massive head, the T-Rex threw the creature's lifeless body to the ground. Evelyn stood frozen, barely able to comprehend what she had just witnessed. The T-Rex, her supposed protector, turned back toward her. Its golden eyes met hers again, and for the first time, Evelyn saw something she never expected. Recognition. This wasn't just a mindless predator. It had made a choice. It had saved her. Evelyn's breath was shallow, her heart hammering against her ribcage as she stared up at the towering beast before her. The T-Rex let out a low, rumbling breath, shaking the ground beneath them. It had just saved her life. That was a fact she couldn't ignore. But why? Dinosaurs were supposed to be creatures of instinct, driven by hunger, dominance, and survival. Yet, in that moment, the T-Rex had acted with intent. It had protected her, placing itself between her and the strange predator that had emerged from the jungle. She took a cautious step back, unsure of what would happen next. The T-Rex watched her movement but did not advance. Instead, it lowered its massive head slightly, nostrils flaring as if trying to catch her scent. Evelyn's radio crackled in her ear. "Evelyn, are you there? What's happening?" Malcolm's voice was urgent, barely concealing his fear. Still unable to tear her gaze away from the dinosaur, she whispered, "It saved me." What are you talking about?" "There was something else," she said, her voice trembling. "Another creature. It attacked, and the T-Rex, it killed it. Protected me." Silence filled the radio for a long moment. "Evelyn," Malcolm finally said, his voice softer now, "you need to get out of there." She knew he was right. This was beyond dangerous. But she also knew she couldn't leave yet. Not now. Not after this. Carefully, Evelyn raised her hand again, mirroring the motion she had used earlier. The T-Rex did not retreat. Its golden eyes remained fixed on her, filled with something she could only describe as awareness. What was it seeing? Did it recognize her as something other than prey? She had spent weeks observing the dinosaurs in this hidden valley, learning their behaviors. She had never seen aggression between them unless provoked. The herbivores grazed in peace, and even the apex predators followed a pattern, hunting only when necessary, never killing for sport. But this T-Rex had acted outside of those patterns. It had intervened. Testing the boundaries of this fragile moment, Evelyn took another step forward. The dinosaur did not react. She swallowed hard, heart pounding as she extended her hand ever so slightly. And then it moved. The T-Rex's massive clawed fingers twitched, then shifted forward. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a shiver through Evelyn's spine. It was acknowledging her. A rustling in the trees reminded her of the dangers that lurked in this place. She didn't know how many of those hybrid predators were out there. The thought sent a chill through her bones. She turned her gaze back to the T-Rex. "You knew it was coming, didn't you?" she murmured. The dinosaur let out a deep, throaty rumble, a sound that vibrated through her chest. Was that a response? Her radio crackled again. "Evelyn, listen to me," Malcolm said. "We're sending in a retrieval team. You need to start making your way back." She hesitated. "I can't leave it. Evelyn, this is a wild animal. I don't care what you think just happened. You are in danger. You need to." A sudden, shrill cry echoed through the jungle. Evelyn's blood ran cold. There was another one. The T-Rex tensed immediately, its massive head snapping toward the sound. It growled low, a deep, guttural warning. Then the jungle exploded once more. From the shadows, two more of the hybrid creatures emerged, their sleek bodies slithering through the undergrowth with terrifying speed. Their scales gleamed in the dim light, their slitted eyes locked onto their prey. Evelyn's instincts screamed at her to run, but she knew it wouldn't make a difference. If those things were as fast as they looked, she wouldn't make it 5 steps before they were on her. The T-Rex, however, did not back down. It stomped forward, placing itself firmly between Evelyn and the approaching predators. It let out a thunderous roar, the sheer force of it shaking the trees. The hybrids hesitated, clearly weighing their options. One let out a sharp hiss, lowering its body like a coiled spring, ready to strike. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears, and then the T-Rex attacked. With terrifying speed, it lunged at the first predator, its massive jaws snapping shut around the creature's torso. A sickening crunch filled the air as bones shattered beneath the immense pressure. The second hybrid took advantage of the moment, darting in from the side, its claws slicing through the air. But the T-Rex was ready. Swinging its massive tail, it struck the creature with enough force to send it flying into a tree. The impact was brutal, The hybrid let out a strangled cry before slumping to the ground, motionless. The first predator, still struggling in the T-Rex's grip, let out one final piercing screech before its body went limp. The jungle fell into eerie silence. Evelyn stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. The T-Rex slowly turned back toward her, breathing heavily from the fight. Blood dripped from its jaws, but its eyes remained locked onto her. And once again, Evelyn felt no fear. She felt something far more terrifying. Understanding. This creature, this apex predator from a time long past, had made a choice. It was protecting her. Her radio crackled. "Evelyn? What's happening? Are you—" "I'm fine," she whispered. She took a slow, measured step forward, closing the small gap between them. And then, for the first time in history, a human reached out and touched a Tyrannosaurus Rex. The beast did not flinch. A deep rumble vibrated through its chest. And Evelyn Carter knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was no longer just an observer. She was part of something far greater. Evelyn stood motionless, her fingers barely grazing the rough, scaly texture of the T-Rex's massive jaw. The warmth of its skin, the steady rise and fall of its breath, the sheer presence of the ancient predator. It was overwhelming. Every rational part of her brain screamed at her to back away, to put distance between herself and this apex predator. But something deeper, more primal, urged her to stay. The T-Rex didn't move, only breathing deeply as its golden eyes studied her with a peculiar intensity. It had just fought and killed to protect her. That realization alone sent a shiver through her body. She let her hand drop slowly. The dinosaur followed the movement, tilting its head slightly, almost curiously. Her radio crackled again, Malcolm's voice thick with urgency. "Evelyn, you're scaring me here. What's happening? What's your status?" She pressed the button. "The hybrids are dead," she murmured. "The T-Rex. It took them down." Pause. "Wait, what? The T-Rex fought for you?" His voice was filled with disbelief. "Yes." Silence. Then, "Evelyn, this is insane. We need to get you out of there." She exhaled slowly, torn between the scientist and her. The one who knew this was dangerous, unpredictable, impossible, and the part of her that had spent her life searching for this kind of moment. "Not yet," she said, knowing the battle she'd have with her team later. The T-Rex shifted slightly, its massive foot sinking deeper into the dirt. It turned its head to the side, as if listening to something unseen. Then it let out a low growl, a warning. Evelyn stiffened. Was there another predator? More hybrids lurking just beyond the trees? She felt the weight of its gaze return to her. And then the impossible happened again. The T-Rex nudged her. Not with force, not with aggression, but with intention. It was telling her something. Evelyn took a shaky breath and turned her head in the direction the dinosaur had looked moments before. The jungle was eerily silent, save for the distant hum of insects and the occasional rustling of leaves. "What is it?" she whispered. The T-Rex let out another growl and began to move, stepping away from the corpses of the fallen hybrids. It walked slowly, its steps heavy yet deliberate, and then it stopped, glancing back at her. It was waiting. Evelyn's heart pounded. This couldn't be real, but it was. It wanted her to follow. Her radio crackled again. "Evelyn, whatever you're thinking, don't..." But she was already moving. Step by step, she followed the enormous dinosaur through the jungle. It moved with surprising grace for its size, weaving between trees and stepping over fallen logs with ease. The canopy above filtered the sunlight into golden beams that dappled its leathery hide. She kept her distance, watching its body language carefully. The T-Rex wasn't hunting, it was leading. But to what? Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt distorted as they traveled deeper into the jungle. The terrain grew denser, the air thick with the scent of earth and damp vegetation. And then they reached it. Clearing. Evelyn's breath hitched. Nestled within the towering foliage was a massive, carefully constructed nest. Her eyes widened in shock. Eggs. T-Rex eggs. Perfectly intact, their leathery surfaces glistening in the dim light. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. This T-Rex wasn't just a predator. It wasn't just an ancient relic of the past. It was a mother, a fierce, intelligent, protective mother. And it had brought her here. For what? Evelyn turned to the dinosaur, her mind racing. The T-Rex watched her, standing tall beside its nest, its golden eyes steady. Then she saw it. One of the eggs had a large crack. Movement flickered inside. It was hatching. Evelyn swallowed hard, every part of her trembling. She had studied dinosaurs her whole life. She had spent years dedicated to understanding them, dreaming of moments like this. But never, not once, had she imagined witnessing the birth of a T-Rex. The mother let out a deep, throaty rumble, lowering her massive head toward the nest. Evelyn remained frozen, barely daring to breathe as she watched. The egg trembled again. A tiny, clawed foot pushed through. Evelyn's heart clenched. The baby was coming. A piece of the eggshell broke away, and then another, revealing a small, delicate snout. The hatchling let out a soft chirp, a sound so foreign, yet so heartbreakingly familiar. The mother T-Rex rumbled again, this time softer, encouraging. The baby responded with another chirp, wriggling as it fought its way free. Evelyn could barely contain the overwhelming flood of emotions surging through her. She wanted to reach out to help, but she knew this was something sacred, something she had no right to interrupt. She was merely a witness. The tiny T-Rex finally emerged, its damp, wrinkled skin glistening as it took its first shaky breaths. Its eyes blinked open golden, like its mother's. The mother T-Rex leaned in closer, exhaling softly over the hatchling. The baby chirped again, reaching up with its tiny, clawed arms. And then, without hesitation, the mother nudged it gently. Evelyn's chest ached at the sight. This was more than just instinct. This was care, love. The baby let out another soft sound, curling against the warmth of its mother's massive frame. Evelyn wiped at the tears she hadn't realized were falling. She had spent her life chasing the past, trying to piece together a world long lost to time. And now, here she was, standing in the presence of something no human had ever seen. Life. Real, thriving, prehistoric life. Her radio crackled again, but she ignored it. Nothing, no scientific paper, no award, no recognition could ever compare to this moment. The mother T-Rex turned her gaze back to Evelyn, as if acknowledging her presence one final time. And then, slowly, she closed her eyes. She was safe. Her baby was safe. And Evelyn Carter knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was the greatest discovery of her life. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her pulse still hammering as she watched the tiny T-Rex hatchling struggle to move on its shaky limbs. It was surreal. This was the kind of moment that only existed in science fiction, the kind of moment that paleontologists dreamed about but never actually experienced. Yet here she was. The mother T-Rex, massive and powerful, was gentle as she lowered her enormous snout toward the baby. Her nostrils flared slightly, taking in the scent of her newly hatched offspring. The baby responded with another chirping sound, nudging its small head against its mother's scaly skin. Evelyn didn't dare move. The mother had brought her here for a reason. It had guided her through the jungle, past the wreckage and corpses of the hybrids, to this sacred space. Why? She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment press against her chest. This wasn't just about survival. This was trust. A mother trusting another being near her vulnerable young. Evelyn felt something shift deep within her. A realization that everything she had ever believed about dinosaurs was about to change. The mother turned her gaze to the rest of the nest, her massive claws carefully adjusting some of the other eggs. One, in particular, had an unusual crack along its surface. It looked as if it had been damaged before it was ready to hatch. Evelyn took a step forward, hesitantly. The mother T-Rex didn't react, only watching her carefully. Another step, then another. She knelt beside the nest, her breath hitching as she reached out toward the cracked egg. It felt warm beneath her fingertips, pulsing with life. Inside, she could see faint movement, but the baby wasn't breaking through. It was struggling. Evelyn hesitated. This was nature's way. Not all hatchlings survived. That was the brutal reality of life in the prehistoric world. But was she really going to stand by and do nothing? The mother huffed softly, her nostrils flaring again as she observed Evelyn. It was as if she, too, was waiting. Was this why she had led Evelyn here? Did she understand, on some instinctual level, that Evelyn could help? She made her decision. Carefully, she dug her fingers into the leathery shell, peeling back the fragile surface. The moment she did, a small, trembling claw pushed forward, followed by a weak chirp. It was alive. Evelyn worked quickly, breaking away more of the shell until the baby T-Rex was fully exposed. Unlike its sibling, this one was much smaller, frilier. It let out another soft cry, struggling to move. It wasn't strong enough. Evelyn's heart clenched. Would it survive? She turned to look at the mother T-Rex, unsure of what to do next. The massive dinosaur watched her closely, then let out a deep, rumbling growl. A call. The tiny hatchling reacted immediately, instinctively turning toward the sound. It let out a weak chirp in response, trying to crawl toward its mother but failing. Evelyn's hands trembled as she gently scooped the fragile creature into her palms. Its tiny body was warm, its skin still slick from the hatching process. She carried it carefully toward the mother, placing it beside her larger sibling. The mother leaned in, nudging the smaller hatchling with her snout. The baby reacted, reaching up toward its mother's massive form. Another chirp, another response. Evelyn watched, holding her breath as the mother extended her tongue slightly, running it gently over the frail baby's skin. She was cleaning it, caring for it, protecting it. Evelyn exhaled, feeling her knees weaken. She had just saved a baby T-Rex, and its mother had accepted her help. The weight of the moment was staggering. Her entire body buzzed with adrenaline, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. This was beyond groundbreaking, beyond scientific discovery. This was something else entirely. A bond. Connection. Her radio crackled, shattering the silence. "Evelyn, do you copy? What's going on? We've got multiple inbound helicopters heading your way." She startled, nearly forgetting that the outside world still existed. She pressed the button, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here. What's your status?" Malcolm's voice was tense. Evelyn glanced back at the mother T-Rex, who was now curled protectively around her two hatchlings. The larger one nuzzled into her side, while the smaller one rested weakly against its sibling. They were safe. For now. She hesitated, then spoke. "I found something." Silence. Then, "What do you mean?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "I can't explain it over the radio. You have to see it for yourself." Another pause. Then, "Copy that. We'll be at your location in 10 minutes. Stay put." She turned her gaze back to the mother T-Rex, feeling an unexpected pang in her chest. She had no idea what would happen next. Would the arrival of her team disrupt this fragile moment? Would the mother see them as a threat? Would she take her babies and disappear into the jungle forever? Evelyn didn't know, but she did know one thing. She had been given a gift, a moment that no human in history had ever experienced, and she would do everything in her power to protect it, even if it meant standing between this mother and the world that sought to control her. The mother T-Rex let out a final, deep exhale, settling in beside her young. Evelyn stepped back, pressing a hand to her chest as she whispered, "I won't let them hurt you." And as the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, she knew that her fight had only just begun. The sound of the helicopters grew louder, the steady thrum of their rotors reverberating through the jungle. Evelyn's heart raced as she glanced at the mother T-Rex. The massive predator had shifted, raising her head toward the sky, her nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the approaching machines. Her instincts were clear. Danger was coming. Evelyn stepped forward, her arms outstretched in a calming gesture. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "They're not here to hurt you." But was that even true? She didn't know who was on those helicopters. Was it her team, or were there mercenaries sent by the same organization that had funded this disastrous project? She had seen how quickly science turned into greed, and she couldn't bear the thought of these creatures being exploited. The mother T-Rex let out a low growl, her massive frame tensing as she shielded her hatchlings with her body. The smaller baby chirped weakly, its fragile form trembling against its mother's scales. Evelyn's chest tightened. She couldn't let this turn into a confrontation. Not here. Not now. The first helicopter broke through the canopy, hovering above the clearing. The downdraft from its rotors sent leaves and debris swirling through the air. Evelyn shielded her face, squinting as the aircraft descended. A voice crackled through her radio. "Dr. Carter, stand back. We're coming in." It was Malcolm. Relief flooded her, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of anxiety. Even if Malcolm and the rest of her team meant no harm, their mere presence could escalate the situation. The mother T-Rex was already on edge, her growls growing louder as the second helicopter appeared. Evelyn raised her radio. "Malcolm, hold your position. Don't come any closer." "Are you serious?" Malcolm's voice was incredulous. "We're here to get you out of there." "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "Not yet." "What are you talking about?" "Evelyn, this isn't the time for heroics. You're surrounded by predators." "I'm not in danger," she replied. Her eyes met the mother T-Rex's intense gaze. "They trust me." Malcolm's silence spoke volumes. Evelyn took a deep breath, her mind racing. She needed to buy time, to convince her team to back off before the mother's protective instincts turned into aggression. She pressed the radio to her lips. "Listen to me," she said. "There are 2 hatchlings here. They're vulnerable. If you come any closer, their mother will see you as a threat. I need you to trust me." More silence. Finally, Malcolm sighed. "Fine. We'll hold position. But you've got 5 minutes before we come down there, whether you like it or not." Evelyn lowered the radio, her hands trembling. 5 minutes. That was all the time she had to calm the situation. She turned back to the mother T-Rex, her voice soft. "It's okay. I won't let them hurt you." The massive dinosaur tilted her head, her golden eyes locking onto Evelyn. There was something there, something more than animal instinct. It was as if she understood. Evelyn knelt beside the nest, her heart pounding. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against the smaller hatchling's fragile frame. The baby let out a weak chirp, its tiny body quivering. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." The mother let out a low rumble, her head lowering slightly as she observed Evelyn's every move. It was a warning, a reminder that trust was fragile and easily broken. Evelyn glanced toward the helicopters, their rotors still slicing through the air above the canopy. She could see the silhouettes of her team inside, waiting for her signal. She had to act quickly. Standing slowly, she turned to face the aircraft and raised both arms, signaling for them to retreat. She hoped Malcolm would understand, that he would trust her enough to give her the space she needed. To her relief, one of the helicopters began to ascend, its rotors carrying it higher into the sky. The second hesitated before following suit. The clearing fell silent once more. Evelyn exhaled, the tension in her chest easing slightly. She turned back to the mother T-Rex, her voice soft. "They're gone. You're safe." The mother watched her for a long moment before letting out a deep, resonant growl. It wasn't a sound of aggression, but one of acknowledgement. She shifted her massive frame, settling back into a protective position around her hatchlings. Evelyn felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had done it. She had protected them, at least for now. But she knew this was only the beginning. The world wouldn't let these creatures exist in peace. Scientists, corporations, governments, they would all want a piece of this miracle. And she would have to fight to ensure that these dinosaurs were more than just a commodity. She knelt beside the nest once more, her hand resting gently on the edge. The smaller hatchling let out another chirp, its eyes fluttering closed as it drifted into a fragile sleep. Evelyn's heart swelled. She had found something here, something she hadn't even known she was searching for: purpose. As Evelyn knelt by the nest, her fingers lightly grazing the delicate scales of the sleeping hatchling, she felt a sense of wonder and urgency collide within her. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a responsibility. These creatures, brought back from extinction, deserved a chance to exist beyond human greed and exploitation. The mother T-Rex shifted slightly, her deep amber eyes watching Evelyn closely, as though weighing whether this human could truly be trusted. The jungle around them seemed to pause, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and prehistoric survival. Then, a distant sound broke through the quiet. Footsteps. Evelyn stiffened. These weren't the heavy, deliberate movements of another dinosaur. These were human steps, calculated, purposeful. Someone was approaching. Her pulse quickened. Had Malcolm disregarded her orders and sent a ground team? Or worse, was it someone else entirely? She turned her head toward the dense foliage at the edge of the clearing, where the sound of shifting leaves and snapped twigs grew louder. The mother T-Rex let out a warning growl, her muscles tensing. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. A man in a black tactical vest, his face obscured by a visor. He carried a rifle slung over his shoulder, and his movements were careful, deliberate. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Not her team. Her worst fears had come true. Someone else had been watching. The mother T-Rex lowered her massive head, her nostrils flaring. The air grew thick with tension as she let out a guttural snarl, her tail sweeping protectively around her nest. The man took a step forward. "Don't," Evelyn said, rising slowly to her feet. Her hands trembled, but she held them up in a placating gesture. "She'll kill you before you take another step." The man hesitated, then tilted his head, considering her. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice muffled beneath the helmet. "We've been looking for you." She swallowed hard. "Who are you?" He took another step forward, and the mother T-Rex roared, her teeth bared. The ground trembled beneath them. The man froze. "I'd listen to her," Evelyn warned, her heart hammering. The man lifted a hand to his visor, pulling it up to reveal piercing gray eyes beneath a mess of dark hair. "My name is Daniel Cross," he said, "and I think we want the same thing." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Which is?" "To make sure they don't end up in a lab," he said simply, nodding toward the hatchlings. She frowned. This wasn't what she had expected. "Then why are you armed?" Daniel let out a quiet breath. "Because there are others who don't share our views," he said. "People who don't care about what's right or wrong. They only care about power." He glanced at the mother T-Rex, who still stood on high alert, ready to strike at any moment. "And they're coming." Evelyn felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "Who?" she demanded. He took a deep breath. "The people who funded this project." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it all the more terrifying. "How do you know?" "Because I used to work for them," Daniel admitted, his expression grim. "Until I realized what they were really after." Evelyn clenched her fists. She had always known there were ulterior motives behind the research, the shadowy investors, the classified files, the layers of secrecy. But she had never imagined it would come to this. The mother T-Rex let out another low growl, shifting her weight. Evelyn took a steadying breath and turned back to Daniel. "If what you're saying is true, then we don't have much time," she said. "What's their plan?" "To secure specimens," Daniel said. "That means capturing or killing anything that gets in their way." A sick feeling churned in Evelyn's stomach. She glanced at the helpless hatchlings nestled in the safety of their mother's shadow. There was no way they would survive an attack. She looked back at Daniel. "Can you help me get them out of here?" He hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I can try." Evelyn exhaled sharply. "Then we need to move. Now." Daniel turned, lifting his radio to his lips. "Falcon, this is Cross. We've got a problem." Static crackled in response before a voice came through. "How bad?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Bad. We need extraction now." More static, then, "Copy that." "It's 5 minutes." Evelyn's heart pounded. 5 minutes. That wasn't much time. She turned to the mother T-Rex, who was still watching her with cautious eyes. Evelyn knew that moving the hatchlings would be nearly impossible. Their mother wouldn't allow it, unless... She swallowed, then took a step closer to the massive dinosaur. "I know you don't trust me," she murmured. her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "But I need you to trust me now. If we stay here, they will come. They will hurt your babies." The T-Rex blinked, tilting her head slightly, as if listening. "I can help you," Evelyn continued, her tone soft. "I can lead you to safety. But we have to go. Now." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the mother T-Rex let out a low, rumbling breath. She understood. Evelyn turned to Daniel. "Which way?" He nodded toward the east. "There's a clearing not far from here. If we can make it there, my team can pick us up." Evelyn glanced at the hatchlings. "We move together," Daniel nodded. And then, with one final glance at the sky, Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Let's go." The dense jungle erupted into chaos as Evelyn, Daniel, the mother T-Rex, and her brood moved eastward toward the clearing. The hatchlings, still wobbly on their feet, chirped and stumbled, their tiny claws leaving faint imprints in the mud. The mother T-Rex stayed close, her body shielding them from every potential threat. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as the distant sound of helicopters grew louder. The looming threat of the shadowy organization Daniel had warned her about was now undeniable. Her mind raced with possibilities, ways to delay them, ways to keep the T-Rex family safe. "How much farther?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart and the crunch of foliage underfoot. Daniel glanced at her, his face tight with concentration. "Just beyond the ridge," he said, pointing toward a break in the trees where the terrain sloped upward. "We'll be exposed, but it's the fastest way to the extraction point." Evelyn bit her lip. Exposure meant vulnerability, but there was no other option. Time was running out. The group pushed forward, the T-Rex mother letting out low growls every few steps, her sharp eyes scanning for danger. Evelyn felt an odd sense of camaraderie with the massive creature. Despite their differences, they shared the same goal, protecting the young at all costs. As they crested the ridge, the jungle opened up into a wide, grassy clearing. The sky above was an ominous shade of gray, heavy with storm clouds that threatened rain. Evelyn spotted a small team of figures near the center of the clearing. Daniel's people, she assumed, standing near a camouflaged helicopter. "There," Daniel said, relief evident in his voice. But before they could descend into the clearing, the sharp crack of a gunshot rang out. Evelyn froze, her blood turning to ice. The T-Rex mother let out a deafening roar, her body coiling protectively around her hatchlings. "Snipers!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Evelyn and pulling her behind a cluster of rocks. "Stay down!" Evelyn's breath came in shallow gasps as she pressed herself against the cold stone. Her mind raced. Whoever was shooting wasn't aiming to kill them. They wanted the T-Rex. The mother dinosaur stood her ground, her massive frame dwarfing everything around her. She let out another roar, the sound reverberating through the clearing. Her hatchlings huddled close to her legs, their chirps filled with panic. "We have to do something," Evelyn shouted over the chaos. Daniel peeked over the rocks, his jaw clenched. "I'll draw their fire," he said. "You get to the helicopter and get it ready to take off." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "You can't." "I don't have a choice," he said, his eyes hard. "They'll kill her if we don't act now." Before she could argue, Daniel sprinted into the open, zigzagging across the clearing. Gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks of rifles echoing through the air. Evelyn's heart leapt into her throat as she watched him weave through the chaos, drawing fire away from the mother T-Rex. "Come on," she whispered to herself, forcing her legs to move. She bolted from her hiding place and sprinted toward the helicopter. Her lungs burned as she ran, her thoughts a blur of adrenaline and fear. Behind her, the T-Rex mother roared again, charging toward the source of the gunfire. Her massive feet shook the ground with each step, her tail sweeping through the grass like a battering ram. Evelyn reached the helicopter and threw herself into the cockpit. She fumbled with the controls, her hands trembling as she tried to remember everything she had learned during emergency training. The blades began to spin, the sound deafening. Come on," she muttered. Daniel appeared moments later, dragging one of the snipers with him. He tossed the man to the ground and climbed into the helicopter. "We've got to go," he shouted. Evelyn glanced back at the T-Rex mother, who was still holding her ground against the remaining attackers. Her hatchlings were safe for the moment, but the situation was deteriorating fast. "We can't leave her," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. Daniel hesitated, then grabbed a rifle from the floor of the helicopter. "Cover me," he said, jumping out before she could stop him. Evelyn's hands tightened on the controls as she watched Daniel sprint back toward the T-Rex. He fired a series of warning shots, forcing the remaining attackers to scatter. The mother dinosaur roared in defiance, her tail swinging in wide arcs. "Get in!" Evelyn screamed as Daniel signaled to her. The mother T-Rex seemed to understand. She nudged her hatchlings toward the helicopter, her movements surprisingly gentle for a creature of her size. The tiny dinosaurs scrambled into the cargo hold, their chirps filling the air. Daniel grabbed onto the side of the helicopter as Evelyn lifted off, the jungle rapidly disappearing beneath them. The mother T-Rex let out one final roar, her massive form shrinking into the distance. As the helicopter ascended, Evelyn felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved the hatchlings. But as she looked back at the shrinking figure of the mother T-Rex, standing alone in the clearing, a pang of guilt pierced her heart. She had made a promise to protect them all, and now the mother was left to face the consequences of their escape. "We'll come back for her," Daniel said, as if reading her thoughts. "We'll find a way." Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. She turned her attention back to the controls, focusing on the horizon as the storm clouds began to break. The hatchlings huddled together in the cargo hold, their tiny bodies warm and fragile. Evelyn reached back to gently stroke one of their heads, her heart swelling with a mix of sorrow and hope. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.